Hello, my name is Ryan Nill. I'm on the board of the Austin Cooperative Business Association, and I've lived in housing cooperatives for 10 years. Cooperatives are a type of democratically managed property, managed by its tenants democratically. And I think there are three main reasons why I and others have been greatly impacted by co-ops, and why I think co-ops should be greatly encouraged in the city of Austin. The first reason is their social impact. My first experience with co-ops was in the West Campus co-op of Arrakis. When I first walked in, there was a group of people studying in the living room, some guys playing some ping pong, and a couple of people cooking dinner for the whole house in the back in the kitchen. And when I immediately walked in, I realized that this was somewhere where I wanted to be. It reminded me a lot of spending the summers with my large extended family in Mexicali, Baja California, and it was something that I definitely thought was missing from my life, having grown up as a nomadic military brat. I lived in 10 different homes and attended 7 different schools by the time I was 15. So I really felt that the kind of skills that I learned in that social environment helped me become more socially intelligent, move beyond social anxiety, and I've definitely heard testimony from many other people that they've had similar experiences. The next impact is an economic impact, and a lot of this has to do with the social aspect of co-ops. For one, I mentioned community dinners. When you have people that cook for you, you do not have to cook. We also have people that do all the shopping for the household. So right now I live at the La Reunion Cooperative Apartment. We have 36 residents, and one person does all the shopping for most of the households. This saves a lot of time on trips, so people do not need to make trips to the grocery store or even need a car. And I'm sure you've heard that one of the challenges of living a car-free lifestyle is purchasing groceries, and that's something that we have really gone far with. Additionally, because of the social aspects, a lot of socializing and friendships occur within the community, so you don't really need to go travel much for community. And I think all that is reflected in car ownership statistics that the ACBA has gathered. The lowest car ownership in a co-op is the college houses, and they have a car ownership rate of 39%. My cooperative has a car ownership rate of 70%, and we're near Anderson and Lamar in the Wooten neighborhood. For comparison, 95% of Austin households own at least one car, and the average American household owns 2 cars. The average American household is 2.5, so that means 75% of men, women, and children in this country own a car, and that doesn't count the people that drive leased cars. Additionally, because it's democratically managed, that means that the residents, they decide where the money gets spent. They decide how much they're going to pay for rent themselves instead of having someone else tell them how much rent they're going to pay. And because people are doing these things on their own, people develop skills to lower the costs and do the work themselves. So some people know how to cook, some people do not know how to balance a checkbook. So you need a diversity of skills, and co-ops have a diversity of people reflecting those skills. And these costs are reflected in price studies that the ACBA has done. Our costs are 40 to 60% of comparable neighborhoods or of comparable properties in their zip codes. And in the community housing expansion of Austin, a co-op property that operates in both the Zilker neighborhood and the Wooten neighborhood, we're able to house 60% of our residents who have incomes of 30% MFI affordably. The final impact is educational. As I mentioned, people have to learn how to do maintenance and basic finance, but you also learn how to deal with conflict, how to cook, how to be a leasing agent, how to evict people, unfortunately. For the larger co-ops, you get to be on the board of a large nonprofit, potentially a multi-million-dollar nonprofit, and work with staff, hire and fire staff. Personally, I learned a lot about democracy. I was really apathetic about politics, and I know that that's an increasing trend for declining faith in democracy, and I think that co-ops have kept me away from that trend. And it's not just us, the co-op community, that thinks that co-ops should be allowed more broadly in Austin. In the strategic housing blueprint, it calls for a reduction in zoning barriers, density restrictions, and mandatory parking requirements for collaborative living arrangements, and specifically co-ops. The Code Advisory Group recommended improving the co-op definition in the code. changing the occupancy to 2 unrelated adults per bedroom, and lowering parking limits. You, the council, have passed a couple of recommendations supporting housing co-ops in the past. For CodeNEXT, we hope to see an improvement in the definition. The current definition, I think, would allow properties that are not cooperative. We suggest using a definition that emphasizes the tenant democratically managed nature of co-ops. We think that co-ops should be allowed by right in all zones. As it stands, we're worried that we could have a co-op that adheres to all the regulations, but because it's not allowed by right, then a neighbor could complain and threaten a co-op, whereas a stealth dorm that adheres to all the regulations would not be threatened by that. There are also some large holes missing in Draft 3. In particular, co-ops are not allowed in mobile home areas. Additionally, we want to see the CAG's recommendation of reducing occupancy limits to 2 unrelated adults per bedroom. Co-ops essentially operate as a single housekeeping unit, as I mentioned earlier, and this reduces the impact of occupancies compared to the same property with the same residents who operate as multiple different housekeeping units. Finally, we think that co-ops need to be included in the university neighborhood overlay language. They're currently not in there, and that's the language that gives UNO properties access to the density bonus and affordability requirements. I think it's an oversight because the definition was separated, and I assume that maybe the person writing it was not aware of that. So I think that's a really easy change. Co-ops are a tried and tested model of affordable housing. They've been operating in Austin since 1942. Someone earlier told me that maybe since 1930. They're around in many different cities. Madison, Wisconsin has co-ops written into their land development code. In New York City, Habitat for Humanity is developing primarily housing cooperatives. Cities such as Minneapolis, Ann Arbor, Berkeley, and Boulder all have cooperative communities. I hope you will incorporate these changes into CodeNEXT. Thank you.
Thank you. Donald Goff.
Thank you, Council. I'm Donald Goff, and thank you, everyone, for giving up your Saturday here. It's very much appreciated. I probably won't take all 3 minutes. I just want to go big picture about the cooperative thing. We've heard a lot today about how CodeNEXT is not going to do anything to help with housing affordability. I think I heard that a lot this morning, particularly. But I want to point out that co-ops have been quietly doing housing affordability, exactly housing affordability for years. Ryan kind of said very quietly that we're 40 to 60% of market rate. I think that's an amazing number. We have a unit, whether it be a large house or a apartment, and have people paying half the rent that the people next door would be paying. That's a really good success story, and I want to make sure that CodeNEXT allows for more co-ops in more places. It's the kind of thing that will grow up if we just have fertile ground for it, and we will grow them for you. So, the other cool thing about co-ops, Austin being the most economically segregated city in the country, something we've all heard about, probably council is aware of. Co-ops tend to span multiple income groups. That's been my experience. I've lived in 2 different ones, the Sona Co-op and Lowry Union Cooperative that Ryan mentioned. And we had folks who were high-tech professionals, and we had folks who were retired living on Social Security, which you almost can't live on, but they were doing it. And the co-op system helped a lot with that. In addition, they tend to be multi-generational. We had a lot of older folks who are, difficulty getting to the store, difficulty, carrying out maintenance tasks and stuff like that. The community around them helps. So I just want to make sure that co-ops are an important part of Austin. They could be a much bigger part in providing affordability to Austin. Just want to make sure that CodeNEXT is going to help that happen. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Beth Aavang. And you have time donated from Carol Lilly. Is Carol Lilly here? No? What?
She's not. She's not here.
All right, so you have 3 minutes.
Okay. Hello, Council. Thank you for hearing our thoughts today. My name is Beth Aavang, and my home is Rosewood Cooperative in District 1. In housing co-ops, the residents have the power. We make decisions through democratic voting. We pool resources, and we operate at cost. The result is a rich, affordable, empowered community filled with folks of mixed demographics and backgrounds. Our rent is half of the cost of the properties around us, as you've heard. And we have committees that hone skills such as accounting, maintenance, community outreach. And we're able to live in areas of Austin that we wouldn't normally be able to, closer to our jobs and public services. I want these benefits for more of my fellow Austinites. I've lived in co-ops for 7 years, and it's been the most formative aspect of my life. Co-ops allowed me to minimize my college debt, gave me experience that helped secure several jobs, and provided me with a continual network of friendship and support. But this prosperous way of living is now threatened by CodeNEXT, largely due to something as simple as an ill-fitting, inaccurate definition which doesn't reflect co-ops as they currently exist. This would nullify properties that have been providing affordable housing to Austinites for decades. The draft also constrains co-ops to zones which are inevitably going to be bought out by wealthy developers to build luxury properties. Co-ops are created by the residents, which can only happen if they have access to affordable properties in which to create these communities. To help co-ops survive and thrive, we ask Council to adopt the changes recommended by the Austin Cooperative Business Association, including, as Ryan mentioned, a changed definition, allowance by right in all zones, changing their occupancy limit to 2 non-related people per bedroom, and granting density bonuses to co-ops in grouped residential zoning. We need to confront affordability and gentrification head on. We can't let our city languish into traffic, sprawl, and displacement. We're going to need a patchwork of affordable housing solutions to do this. And co-ops are a valuable addition as they're incredibly self-starting and self-maintaining. They preserve older properties and embody the spirit of Austin that so many hold dear. Empower us to do our part by creating more friendly conditions for co-ops in CodeNEXT. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
I have a quick question for you. You referred to some recommendations that have been submitted. Did you send those to all of our offices?
We can if it hasn't already been.
It may have, and we may have. Do you have a sense of?
I'll send an updated one.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Thanks.
Send that to everyone, please. Thanks. Okay. Daniel Hardesty-Lewis.
Okay, so, all right, PDF's coming up, but that's not necessary for the moment. My point is simple. The most recent draft of the code includes a definition for democratic cooperative housing, and I commend the Planning Commission for it. Certainly, one of the only evidence means to preserve the residential nature of a neighborhood through wild increases in prices of such a neighborhood's houses is through banding together in the form of a democratic cooperative. In the early half of the 20th century, corporatization, instead of corporatization, note, within the farming industry provided the survival of many families of farmers through the Great Depression and increasing corporatization of their trade. Such was the birth of the cooperative movement in the United States, and in particular, here in Texas. Amongst the first laws regarding cooperatives here in Texas with regards to ag cooperatives. With upwards 80% of the citizens of the United States currently having yet to experience the recovery of the Great Recession, it would be foolish for the City of Austin to adopt a code which restricts the locations where cooperatives may be established. My very own cooperative, the Royal House of ICC Austin, prides its origin in those times late, 1930s, as Ryan was the person who spoke to, late in the Great Depression. That's right. It still exists today. I currently live in it. It has provided affordable housing for students since those days. Early drafts of the code permitted the wide existence of cooperatives throughout the residential areas of Austin. Yet the most recent draft, Draft 3, explicitly struck any possibility of housing cooperatives from R2 residential areas. I advocate for the possibility of democratic housing cooperatives throughout the residential areas of Austin. I believe, and I know from having witnessed it in other cities such as Boulder, Colorado, that the cooperative house forms a robust basis for a model of affordable housing for the city's families, in particular for those who do not find themselves in the upper echelons of income. Allow the city's residents the options of the cooperative in whichever residential area they please. Do so that today's residents may weather the lingering effects of the Great Recession, many of whose residents have yet to see, and weather the city's changing affordability landscape, and do so together. Help prevent the increasing corporatization of Austin's housing. Cooperatives will allow current residents and current families to do so, just as they have been since the Great Depression, just as they are currently in the last ends of the Great Recession. I myself am recently engaged and have begun considerations as to the appropriate long-term housing for this, my family, and its potential family members. We have concluded that cooperatives is an ideal model for it. We have concluded that cooperatives are an ideal model for it. Will you? The majority of non-student cooperatives in Austin find themselves, and here's where this point comes up, in the previously mentioned R2 zones. You may proceed through them. I included all of them, not just the ones that were in R2. Continue, please. I assure you that the vast majority of non-student housing cooperatives
Sir?
throughout the United States find themselves
Sir?
in residential neighborhoods as well.
Thank you for your time.
Yes. It was the last line anyways. Thank you.
Good. Is Laura Aavang? And then Hannah Frankel. 3 minutes.
Hello, and thank you, Council, for sharing your Saturday with us. My name is Laura Aavang. I currently live in a District 9 co-op and have lived exclusively in co-op since I moved to Austin 3 years ago. As a passionate proponent of cooperative living, I'm here to ask that the Council takes up the recommendations given by the Austin Cooperative Business Association, as mentioned, including creating a more accurate definition of cooperative housing and changing the occupancy limit. Under the current language of CodeNEXT third draft, over 90% of existing co-ops in Austin would not be allowed. We ask that the zoning be expanded to be allowed by right in all zones, including R2 zones, where many Austin co-ops already reside. As the communications officer for my co-op, I field housing inquiries from the community, and there's not a week that goes by that I don't receive messages from folks looking for a co-op to live in. My timing was incredibly lucky, and I'm so grateful for securing my spot in my co-op. Living there has been such a formative and empowering part of my life, and is the only way I'm able to afford living centrally. In fact, my co-op is 60% or so cheaper than the rental rates of surrounding properties in Bolden Creek. We also enjoy countless other benefits like sustainable living, democratic governance, and shared resources. Co-ops are truly are a community-based affordable housing option in line with Austin's progressive values and history. It can also be an important piece to Austin's housing crisis solution. My co-op has been around for almost 40 years, living harmoniously in our residential neighborhood and providing empowering, affordable housing for hundreds of Austinites. There is such a stark scarcity of open co-op spots for Austin adults currently, and it saddens me to turn down those folks each week that message me. I hope that the Council sees the immense benefit cooperative housing offers to the City of Austin, the strong support that it already has, and how important it is that CodeNEXT supports its future. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Hello, honorable council members and mayor. Thank you for spending the Saturday with me. I'm here to speak to you today on behalf of cooperative housing being supported as an affordable housing tool in CodeNEXT, to expanding cooperatives to all zones in the city and otherwise altering regulation to facilitate cooperative housing development. I hope you will accept the Austin Cooperative Business Association's recommendations and move forward with CodeNEXT while seeking to improve it. I've lived in cooperative housing for 10 years, and I'm a co-founder of La Reunion Cooperative, a multi-family apartment-style cooperative in District 7, near the intersection of Anderson and Lamar. I pay $445 a month, which includes my groceries, 7 hot meals a week, and an amazing community. My cooperative is considered deeply affordable by HUD standards, as it is affordable to those earning less than 25% of area median family income. To make sure our units reach those who need it, we accept Section 8 voucher holders and prioritize applicants with Section 8, as well as those with our nonprofit partners, which include ECHO, Caritas, Safe Place, and Front Steps. I love living in a community that is diverse in race, age, and income. I live in a neighborhood, and I believe I belong in it. I live in a multifamily building. I may never be able to afford a home in Austin, and I think I still deserve to be considered as a long-term stakeholder in the neighborhood. When starting my career as a social worker, my affordable rent allowed me to work for nonprofits I cared about with nonprofit wages. Now in my work in clinical mental health, I'm able to offer sliding scale rates and take insurance I would otherwise not be able to rationalize working with if I didn't have an affordable home. I believe mental health is important, and I'm glad that I'm in a position to help those who have trouble affording it. As a small business owner, living in cooperative housing has allowed me to launch a practice before the age of 30, something out of reach for many paying a higher proportion of their income in rent. As a citizen, managing my co-op taught me a commitment to the democratic process and a desire to contribute in other ways. I've served as a city commissioner for 2 years and was recently termed out as vice president of my neighborhood association, where I was instrumental in getting more than $80,000 of park infrastructure built. Again, I believe I belong in my neighborhood. As a person, my cooperative community has supported me through some of the worst times of my life, and I'm so thankful for it. All in all, I believe I've got it pretty good. Lucky me, right? I think most of us in this room have it pretty good, and we have an obligation to not be selfish, to pay forward our good fortune by making policy choices that offer the most good to the most people. I'm here in support of easing the development of cooperative housing standards and regulations, because if we don't develop proactive approaches to affordable housing, we will lose most of our existing affordable housing. There's a lot of research, data, and history to suggest that cooperatives should be one of the tools to address this, which I and we are happy to provide. Cooperatives operate by self-management from their tenants, eliminating overhead and allowing cost savings and stability in rents and policies. As you've heard from several people, we pay 40 to 60% of the rental rates of surrounding areas. You all have an open invitation to visit us for dinner sometime if you'd like to see what all the fuss is about. Thank you.
You guys were great. Thank you. Or great modeling. Okay.